Welcome, everyone, to the T-Rap Show with your host, Trapper Goldsmith, where we showcase elite athletes and sport individuals with their inspiring stories and rise to glory in their pursuit of everlasting greatness. So I'm excited for today. We have a decorated multi-sport champion, Alysia Rissling, or as she's known to most as Riz. She's an Olympian, a podcast host, an ambassador for sport, and just all around badass. If you follow her Instagram, you'll not only see she has passionate love for the Oilers, but she also goes freaking fast in a bobsled. So having overcome adversity, not only in injuries, but also being a driving factor in pioneering the first female four-person bobsled team that competed in the North American Cup Tour. So if you haven't heard of her, you're going to get to know her very well and hopefully walk away from today's episode with some inspiration, some keys to overcoming adversity and pursuing your dreams in sport and what it takes to go pro. So Alysia, welcome.
Wow, it's quite the introduction. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So now anyone who's gotten to professional level, which really, I consider like NCAA and above to be a professional level. It's the same commitment, same focus, elite competition. They know how hard it is to get there in one sport. Now, you had scholarship offers in volleyball, basketball, track and field, and soccer. So you were just like an athletic freak of nature, hey?
I don't know if you call it that. I was good at everything, but I don't think I was actually great at anything. But I worked my butt off to try and be.
So let's dive in there. What was it like for Alysia growing up as an athlete? Your dad, I believe your dad played professional hockey. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I came from a family full of hockey players. My dad played pro in Europe and in the American League. It wasn't called that then. I think it was called the IHL. And my uncle played in the NHL, led the league in penalty minutes. So I came from a hockey family and just kind of always grew up playing everything I could from day one. I think I had a grandmother who was in the ice capades. So I figure skated. I think I was on skates by the time I was 2. Wow. And then hit a massive growth spurt. And I think I was just always destined to be tall, and then wound up being just under 6 foot and realized I'm tall. I should start playing volleyball and basketball because those just make sense because I'm tall. Yeah.
Did you play hockey growing up?
That's the only sport I didn't play, and I wanted to play. I fought to play. Unfortunately, I had a mom who regrets it to this day. That didn't let me play, but it was still kind of the time where she's like, hockey's for boys, which we know is not true now. And I think I would have been a phenomenal hockey player, and it still is my favorite sport, even though I've never played it. And
it's booming. Like women's hockey right now is doing phenomenal.
Could have been at the forefront of that. I could have been involved in it. That's
could have built the league. Okay, so was it because your dad played and she knew what he went through that she didn't want you to play, or was it just? Yeah, it was along those lines. And I think in general, I think my mom just wished she had us in dance and kind of more the feminine sports. And I think she was kind of hoping if we were going to be athletic, it was going to be more in the feminine sports. And then sure enough, I get into, when I'm old enough to do whatever I want, I get into probably the most hardcore, like rough sport there is out there. Yeah. Well, you would have been too tall for gymnastics. That's for sure.
Way too tall. Yeah. I was in diving. I was not very good at diving. I had a neighbor who was an Olympian. So I always grew up around a lot of strong female role models. And she was my babysitter, and she went to the 2000 and 2004 games for diving. So we naturally got into diving. My sister, who's 5'4", was much better at those things than I was.
And did your sister pursue anything professionally as well?
I won't get into too much detail because it hurts her soul a little bit that my little brother went on to be a pro hockey player as well. He played in the WHL and then went on to play in the American League and the East Coast League and in Europe. And my sister didn't. She played sport all the way through high school, but it was never athletic. Was never really her calling.
The black sheep of the family didn't become an athlete, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
So you went to U of A, played basketball. I think you started out basketball, track and field, but then
track.
stuck with basketball.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest problem coming out of grade 12 was I didn't know which one I wanted to do. So I think soccer I could have ruled out. I played club level. I played on the high school team. We actually won nationals, or not nationals, that we provincials for soccer cities. I can't remember what it's called. That was way too long ago. I'm getting old. And I had ACAC, so Alberta Colleges offers for soccer and volleyball. And then I had NCAA offers for basketball. None to the schools that I wanted to go to. And if it was a school I wanted to go to, they didn't have the program I wanted to be in. I had NCAA like Div 1 offers for track. But the thing about track that I didn't like is I loved the team aspect of team sports. I was always like favored team sports. I was
Mm.
good at track. I loved the training for track. But U of A offered both to stay home. And I think mom wasn't ready to lose her baby. I'm the oldest of the three siblings. And she begged me. She's like, you know what, this is such a good offer. Like, just stay home. And the team at U of A, particularly basketball, I went on a recruiting trip with the girls and I had the best time ever. And I was like, I want to be on this team. These people are awesome. Like, they're going to be lifelong friends. I could just tell from my recruiting trip when I was 17 years old. Right. So, that was really the selling feature. And so, yeah, went to U of A, barely got to go do much of the track at all. I think I went to practice maybe 4 times in preseason and then didn't even do a competition because by the time I went back to start doing outdoor basketball, we went all the way to the national final that year. We lost by 4 points.
Oh,
Um, yeah. And as soon as I went to track, it was literally like day 4 back at track doing jumping practice. And that's when I really started to notice that I was developing this ongoing injury that turned into me missing a big chunk of the next year and ultimately having to get surgery.
so going into university, what was your mindset? Did you know you wanted to play professionally? You wanted to be a professional athlete, or was it like I want to get my education and I still want to play sport? But what was your mindset?
Yeah. So I think for me as a young, and my mom's a teacher. So my dad's the athlete, my mom's the teacher. And education was always pushed down her throat. Like, I wasn't allowed to go to practice. I wasn't allowed to do anything unless I was acing school. And luckily for me, I was a very good student. So I didn't really have any issues, with school growing up. And I knew what a scholarship was from a young age. So actually in the 5th grade, I tell this when I do my public speaking, a teacher asked us, instead of, when you're little kids, you get asked all the time, and I'm sure we all ask little kids all the time, like, what do you want to be when you grow
Yeah,
up?
totally.
And they always say tangible things. They say like a firefighter or a doctor or a lawyer or, like a teacher, like things they can see that are in front of them. There's so many jobs out there that like are hard to kind of comprehend. It's like, oh, I want to be a market analyst. Like, no 10-year-old is saying that. But I always wanted to be a professional athlete. And as a woman, I didn't have the I guess the dream to do it because it wasn't in front of me. Like, there was no professional women. And I know there's tennis and I know there's golf, but I'm in Edmonton. Like, those weren't the sports that everyone was participating in. I didn't have
Right.
a country club that I was going to. And so, and yes, there was the WNBA, but what the WNBA was not something that it was big. It's not like it is today. Like, I feel like they've grown the game so well and it continues to grow. And what it is today was not the same thing it was when I was 10 years old. So
Mm.
for me, it was an education focus. It was like, I want to be a doctor. I want to use sport as an avenue to pay for my education so I can become a doctor. And that was always the plan. So when I talk about NCAA, the school I really wanted to go to in Santa Monica, they didn't have pre-med. So that's kind of like, well, it was like, yeah, I want to play basketball there. It would be great. But then what am I going to take? Because I know I want to study to become a doctor.
Mm. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think the number one career that kids want right now is be a YouTuber. I think
I
that's the
know.
number.
But no, they did a study on this between, I don't know the Canadian equivalent, but I heard that they did a study on 80% of youth under the age of 14 want to be an influencer in the
Yeah.
US.
Yeah.
That's
Man,
crazy.
times have
And the crazy
changed.
thing is there's so much money in that they can do that. But it's like, is it going to collapse society? It might. We'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, but like what I had, so my boy said the same thing, right? And what most people, so every kid wants to be like a pro athlete, or they have that want, but what they don't understand is the work, the commitment, the behind it. I mean, even to be a YouTuber, like, it's a lot of work. You look at some,
I don't discredit any
100%.
YouTuber, any influencer. Like, I know how hard it is as an athlete, even an athlete that, yes, I'm a professional, but I didn't make any money. All the money I made, I had to fundraise myself and acquire a sponsor. And like, that was a full-time job. And that full-time job also needed to have a platform. So that's almost where it kind of turned into that influencer route, where I had to build myself a brand.
Right.
And I know how hard it worked, and that's for my 5,000 followers, not 500,000, and the upkeep it takes, and like the team you need behind you. Like, it is very hard work. I'm not discrediting anyone who makes it.
Well, we won't talk about how some of the women out there get 500,000 followers on Instagram, and it's not through their fundraising. Let's put it that way. So
yeah,
you touched on that. Let's kind of like, how difficult is it for Canadian athletes, especially like on the Olympic side? Like, how hard is it out there for funding and to pursue the sport you love? But at the end of the day, we still got to eat. We still got to, make money.
Yeah. So I don't know how to tell this in a short version, so it might be a little bit of a short version of a long story. So when I got into bobsled, which long story short for this part is, I graduated after university, took a year off, wrote my MCAT twice, didn't get in, was really feeling like I hadn't accomplished everything I was meant to athletically yet. And I had heard about bobsled, and I put a poll. I have this screenshot actually on my Facebook, because that was the only social media that was cool at the time. I don't even think Instagram existed yet. And I was like, what sport should I go into next? CrossFit, golf, hockey, or bobsled? And I think, and bodybuilding was the other one that was on there, and people voted on it. And it was like kind of split vote, but I already kind of knew I was going to attempt bobsled. And if I didn't go into bobsled, I wanted to go into CrossFit. And the reason why I didn't choose hockey is because it was going to be too expensive. What a joke that is. Because little did I know I was going into the most expensive sport that ever existed. Not realizing, because I didn't really know a lot about the sport in general. I knew the qualities of being a good bobsledder, where you have to be strong, fast, and powerful, which was kind of all how I identified as an athlete. I was always the big fast one. So I knew that kind of those qualities might taper over, and I've always been a little bit of a speed demon. You can check my driving record for that as well. And so, yeah, when I got into bobsled, I didn't realize that, yes, at the baseline, there is equipment available to you, but to win a bobsled race, you need three things. You need the fastest push, the smoothest drive, and you need the best equipment. And the best equipment literally means you need a country that has millions of dollars, millions, I'm talking, into research and development to create a sled building project that's actually going to build the next fastest sled. And that's really why the Germans are so dominant, and the Americans and Canadians used to be, because we did have a sled building project that ended after 2010. So to wrap up what you're saying in terms of how athletes, how hard they have to work, once you get to a national team level, you get what's called carding, which means the government pays you, and they pay you the same. So our carding, when I got it in 2015, it was $1,500 a month. And then it went up to $1,750. And that was the first time that they had increased it in 22 years. Don't quote me on that exact number, but it was a ridiculous amount of time. So if you account for things like inflation, things that we all know about, $1,750 paid my rent and my food. It did not pay any of my training expenses. It did not pay any of my competition fees, any of my training travel. It didn't pay anything else of my life. So yes, I was very grateful for that, because sometimes that was the only money I had. But when you leave for 5 months a year to go competing across the globe mostly, and I spent a lot of time in Europe, it's really hard to hold a job. And when we're training, competing, like I have 12-hour days at the track sometimes. So I don't have time to do a job. And if you're not training full time to like, and treating your competition season like it's a full-time job in the off season, you're not even competing at that level, because that's what everybody else is doing. So you have to find really creative ways to make money. And I was lucky enough that the service industry for me, I was a bartender for probably 12 years of my life. And it's just such a great industry in terms of I could, work on weekends and do really well on weekends. I don't think it's like that much anymore. It was back in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Or I could work evenings and I could train all day. So my schedule was in the summertime, which our summer is about March to September. I'd be, I'd be working from sometimes 4 o'clock. Sometimes I'd start at 7 o'clock. And then most of the time I'd work until midnight, or if it was a weekend, it was 5 a.m. I'd sleep until 11 a.m. and I was at the gym by noon. I would usually wrap up the gym by 3, have a quick shower, and then be back at work. So that was my life for the 6 months or 7 months of off season. When I was a development athlete, when I was kind of working my way up the ranks, to try and fund my season, the cheapest I ever spent on a year of bobsled was $14,000. And the most expensive year I had, I bought a bobsled for $91,000. And I also bought a set of runners that year. So that year cost me $114,000.
No big deal.
So yeah.
Welcome to bobsledding.
Yeah. Welcome. That obviously was not paid for on a bartender server salary. There was no way that I could do that. And every year I operated at a loss, except for one for the last 10 years. So it's been, there's a lot of personal sacrifice in terms of your future. Like getting married this year, and we're talking about maybe one day we'll own a house, and I'm 34, and I just feel I'm so far behind, but I also wouldn't have changed anything because I had a pretty incredible experience. Yeah.
I think you make that sacrifice as an athlete, right, in pursuit of your career. So you had to raise money to get that bobsled. You were out there knocking down doors here, in Calgary. How important do you think it's for an athlete learning those business skills and being able to brand yourself and get sponsorship and actually kind of look at the business side of being an athlete?
Now I think if you don't know how to do that and you go into a sport that isn't a primary sport that's well funded, or any sport that you're not at the top, you have to do that. And that can be the difference of you having a long career or having a very, very short career. In bobsled in particular, I know we attract brakemen that come into the sport and they're there for, maybe a year or two. And just because they see there's no money in it and it's a grind. So they come in when they're in their prime and they push really fast, and then they get out just to say that they've did it. Because unfortunately it's really hard to make a long career out of it. The branding and the world of social media, it's kind of like social media was becoming a thing as I was going through my athlete journey. And now it's like the basis of any athlete journey. So I would say if you're an athlete that can start building your brand in high school, do it now, because now we've got NIL and NCAA. You can make money from the day you get recruited, and you need to be able to capitalize on it. Because it's if you even think about what golf is doing now, they're paying for the names and a lot of opportunities that people are getting. And even look at fighting, like what Jake Paul is doing. He shouldn't be the main card on a fight, but he is, because he has the viewership. And that's where the money is. And I'm not saying you should be playing sport for the money at all, because if it's your passion, but if you want to turn it into a career because you love it so much, rather than just sacrificing your future just because you love it so much, that's, I think, where the brand and the business side of it comes into such a big play.
Your net worth is your network nowadays. I feel like. So here's 100%. Actually like just a random question. If you're because I know the NCAA is pretty strict on like their no whatever you call it, like earning incentives and stuff like that. If you're an influencer at a young age, you get an NCAA scholarship. Can you earn income from like through your social
Oh,
media?
you don't know that they changed the rule last year.
Oh, I did not know that.
No, they changed the rule last year. That was a huge announcement. It was last. It wasn't like, it was the beginning of last season, so it would have been like not September of 22. It would have been September or fall of 2021. They
Yeah.
changed the rule, so now we've got NCAA athletes that are literally signing $1 million endorsement deals as freshmen.
No
Yes.
way.
So the rules are still very strict on the school side. Schools
Right.
cannot be offering you under the table, even though we knew for the big names that, like they had a partnership with Bob's Ford dealership. So the kid comes in and they got a brand new vehicle
Yeah.
that was gifted or whatever that might be. There was ways around it, but they changed the rule that the school cannot directly pay for name, image, likeness. It's called NIL. But the athletes themselves can get their own endorsement deals. Yeah.
Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't know about your opinion, but I agree with, because like if you're an NCAA athlete and you're looking to get drafted as the number one draft pick, but you have a career-ending injury, well, you've dedicated your entire life to sport and you've made $0 because you didn't, injury or whatever. So I totally agree with that they should be earning it at that stage.
100%. I 100% agree with you. You've got athletes who the school is making millions of dollars off just because people are coming to see, the next, whether it be LeBron James or whatever it is, right? So like the fact, and the Olympics was like this too for a long time. For a long time, amateur athletes, if you were an Olympian, you weren't allowed to make any money. You weren't. That has kind of been a slower progression, that they did have to change the rule, but it wasn't like a big announcement because it happened pre-social. It happened kind of, I'm going to say late or mid 2000s, like early like 2000, let's say 2005 maybe, where athletes, it became your amateur status wasn't determined whether or not you were making endorsement money. So that kind of was the first thing to change, but it took the NCAA 20 years almost to catch up and realize that, they were already big money makers. Like these NCAA, if you're a Pac-10 or whatever schools you are, you make a lot of your university funding comes through your athletics program.
Yeah.
So why shouldn't the athletes get a piece of their own pie?
Yeah, don't even get me started on my opinion on post-secondary and the money they make. But okay, let's kind of rewind here. Let's jump back into your adversity. You were injured in university, trying to find funding. You know what you want to do. You chose bobsledding, but now you got to come up with 90 grand. Alysia, what's your mindset when it comes to adversity?
It's funny. My team started calling me Resilient Rizzo.
I love it.
It didn't matter what was thrown at me. I always find a way. There's no such thing as quit. Every time my personal motto has always been challenge accepted. You're going to tell me I can't do something, I'm going to prove to you that I can do it. And as long as it's something that I truly want, because that's what has to happen. It has to come from the heart. If you're chasing something you don't really want, you never will get it. But if you truly want it, like, you will find a way, and you might not know what that path is to get there. Like I said, I was in school for sciences. I thought I was going to go into medicine. I had no business background. I had no idea what a business proposal was. So I, out of desperation, out of me going onto the World Cup circuit in what I would describe a Ford, and everyone else was driving Ferraris. And I felt like I was being told what my potential was when I wanted to prove that my potential was actually higher. But the missing piece of that was I needed the comparable equipment. So I out of desperation to fundraise then to find that sled that I wanted, I spent 2 weeks, probably 12 hours a day. And I was tapering, so it was nice. I didn't have to train for like 4 hours a day, 6 days a week, into my season. literally going through LinkedIn courses, everything I could find on the internet of like, how do you create a business proposal? How do you do a pitch? And I put together like a deck, like a sales deck, which is so funny because now this is what I do in my life now, which is really like I turned it into a career after. But I didn't know that that was a thing. I didn't know that that was like the normal thing. It was just I did what was felt right, and I found a way to market my sled as to layman's terms and convince. I was lucky enough that I didn't have to make too many phone calls. I had a connection. Again, somebody I met through networking, just from working, and he was a regular and put the time in to talk, learn about his life, and he learned about mine. And he's like, well, if you ever need help connecting with companies, I'm pretty well connected. So I had to track him down, literally stalk him in the neighborhood and find him, be like, you told me you would help me. And he got me, like what he did was he eliminated the cold call part, and he got me meetings with decision makers. But then it was up to me to have this pitch and go in and present in a boardroom of why people should invest in me as an athlete. And very nerve-wracking thing. And it was something that I didn't really think I had a good chance. But how I like to word it is in Dumb and Dumber, when he asked her out on a date, and she's like, not in what's my chance of you going out?
What are my
with me?
chances?
She's like, yeah, what are my chances? And she's like, 1 in 100 million. He's like, so you're saying there's a chance? So I had to try. And again, it's just like that belief and investment in myself and going out and I got really lucky. I mean, I had a down payment for the sled within 2 weeks, and I had the whole thing paid off in 2 months. And this is kind of like in conjunction to my season starting. And I was like wrapping up, still signing contracts and doing deals while I was already in Whistler with my season started, and the sled's on the way from Europe. It was going to arrive. It came about a month late from season. And but yeah, that sled showed up and it definitely changed the trajectory of my career. So it was one of the best things I ever did. And I realized that it was much more fun for me to be able to create a platform and build a brand that I can pursue more philanthropic events. I'm passionate about. I was volunteering with Classroom Champions, and I was passionate about. Still am. I'm on the board for Kids Sport Edmonton subcommittee, and then I'm a Kids Sport Calgary ambassador. Still, even though I'm retired now, I continue to be a part of these associations because they're very important and near and dear to my heart. But I couldn't do that on a volunteer basis if I didn't have any income. So that's kind of how I built my brand. Is I want to be the girl who can give back, but I need you to kind of help pay me so I can live my life and train as hard as I can so I can use my platform for better.
Yeah, that's good. So you went to university for to pursue med school, right? That was kind of, but
Sciences,
it didn't work out. You didn't kind of end up there. So do you look at that as a failure, or do you, like, with your mindset that you don't quit, how do you perceive that in your life? And was it a catalyst to your career now, or how do you look back on that?
100% it was a catalyst to my career now, but when I define my life, that is the biggest failure I ever had in my life, because it was the
Thanks,
only
Trapper, for bringing it up, right?
No, but you know what? No, but you know what? When you're I would have been 18 years old at the time. We're going to make mistakes. And when I look back on that part of my life, I realized I never want to make them. And it took a while for me to grow into this. And I actually developed this kind of self motto in my third year bobsled, and it was about bobsledding, and I was learning how to drive the sled, and I made so many mistakes. Like, I was a crasher. I crashed all the time. I smashed walls. Like, I wasn't good, but I realized that if every single time I made a major mistake, if I learned from that thing, and I made it I promised myself that I was never going to make that same mistake twice, I eventually started running out of mistakes to make on the track. Because I knew, the little things there are hard. You can't be dialed in 110% every time. There's no such thing as a perfect run. But in terms of like the catastrophic ones where something bad happened, like a crash, if I could learn from it and never make that same mistake twice, then I started crashing less. And I realized it's really applicable to my life in general. And I made a big mistake in university. I did. I had a huge goal of trying to get into med school, but I I thought I could just coast there, and I didn't really like dial in and focus on it when I was in university. I was having way too much fun with my basketball team. Our motto might have been win or lose, hit the booze on a Saturday night. So, do I regret those decisions? No, because I think I still kind of is who I am. Now, I wish I would have learned more how I could have better made decisions. Did I have to go out every single weekend? No, I probably could have gone out once a month, like that's kind of where the regret comes in. And then, however, and sometimes I look at my life right now and I'm like, it would be so different if I was a doctor right now and kind of pursuing that passion. And part of me still wishes I could be, but I have no desire to go back to school for 7 years. But I realized that it still gave me this incredible opportunity, and it did change who I am. But now when I set goals, I know that I have to be way more focused on them. Like if they're a true goal, I've got like, here's a little loser in me. I've got my vision board and my personal goals that I look at every day, because if I don't have those checks and balances where I'm not keeping myself accountable, I'm never going to get to them. And I've realized in a lot of adult goals that they can't just be a pipe dream. Like I like to set a goal and work my way back. And if I don't have that accountability, it's like, maybe I'm not checking in every single day, but if I don't check in once a month, well, how am I doing towards that 5-year goal that I have, or that 10-year goal I have? You're not going to get there any quicker. So, thankful for that big mistake that I made, because now I know I'll never make a huge mistake like that again. But if you're not making mistakes, you're also not chasing anything, and you're not growing as a human being. But the biggest part about those mistakes is being able to learn from them so that you can move forward.
Totally. Right. But here's, I'll ask you a question, and here's what will tell you if it's a mistake or not. If you could trade everything you've had after university, your bobsledding career, what you've done for Canadian sport, what you've achieved at an Olympic level, if you could trade all that and you would be a doctor right now, but you didn't get to do everything that you've done or where you are now, would you trade that?
No, I wouldn't. Now, could I have done both? I don't know. That's the only thing I could have. Yeah, was there a way that I could have done both? I don't know. I don't think I was emotionally mature enough to do both. But if there could have been a way, in my mind, the answer is always, why can't I do everything? And sometimes the realization that we literally can't do everything. But I always try to. And I'm the person who always has way too much on my plate.
So what do you think, Alysia, is the difference? I mean, people quit all the time. So what's the difference between people quit and those who don't? They just stay in the fight. What's that X factor, do you think?
That, the X factor has to come from your soul. It's not something that's superficial. I think, and I think that's the big thing I look at when I see a lot of people in pursuit of whatever they're doing. And the biggest difference I see in people who I consider high performers, and it doesn't have to be high performer in sport. It's the CEO of that company, or somebody who's a leader in this industry, or breaking through in some research. The difference between those people and the people who work for them is how bad they wanted it. And I think that's it's a you can't teach drive. That's the one thing that I've been very frustrated in, and I try to explain to kids, because kids ask that question all the time. Kids are like, I want to be an Olympian. And I'm like, you can be, but you have to want to be. Yeah. Like, and that's the one thing I can't stress enough. It's like, how hard are you willing to work for it?
Yeah. How bad you want it, that inner why. Okay. So with that, you have an up and coming girl who's an athlete. She wants to, follow Alysia Rissling and her footsteps. What do you tell a young woman athlete coming up and wants to play professional sports? What's your advice to her?
My advice, this is the number one thing I say, especially to women, is do not let anyone dictate what your potential is except for yourself. There have been so many times in my career where somebody else thought that they had the audacity to tell me that this is how good I was going to be. Like, they put a ceiling on how good I could have been. And I always smashed through those, I felt, and exceeded them. Mostly. Obviously there's things that get in the way, there's setbacks that are going to happen. But I think if you, again, it's like, how bad do you want it, and go out and get it, and don't let anyone else tell you that you can't have it. That's the thing that I would definitely recommend the most.
That's wicked. Okay, I want to wrap up here talking about the multi-sport, like being a multi-sport athlete. Most athletes struggle just like with one. What do you think allowed you to play so many sports competitively and be successful at all of them?
That's a good question. I think it comes down to the lessons and the things that sport ingrains in people. And I think sport is amazing, especially for women, for confidence. When you play a sport, and I just know it's very clear to me when I meet someone in whether it be the corporate world or just outside, if it's not from an athletic thing, I can tell if they played sport. It really, if you're talking about kind of how they think, their ability to speak to other people and manage different personalities, I think you just get so many lessons from sport. And I don't know why I played so many. I think the problem was just I loved everything, and I just had this overwhelming desire to always play. I just love to play. I'm right now even playing volleyball and basketball. So like it's just for me, it's the fun aspect, it's the fitness. I feel so good. Fitness now for life, but it just like I'm constantly chasing the adrenaline rush that I get from it, because it makes me feel good. And when I feel good, I'm better at everything. I'm better in my relationships. I'm better at work. I'm the best version of who I am. And I find that sport enables me to get there.
Do you think being a multi-sport athlete is there's advantages to it?
1,000%. That if you're talking about, how kids now are specializing so young, and there is there's a lot that's pro to that, but I think the burnout and the you just get sick of it. Like I know, for instance, basketball. When I graduated from basketball after 5 years, my last year I had 7 stress fractures. I had 4 in one shin, 7 and 3 in the other. It just hurt me all the time. I did not touch a basketball. I didn't want to look at it for 2 years. Like it was just like I was so done with the sport. So if you could think about like backtracking and doing that to a 12-year-old, fast forward by the time they get 17 and they're supposed to be going into the best part of their career, and they're already kind of starting that resentment. That's where the risk really comes in. And I think having played, soccer, that works on a different conditioning system than volleyball, where volleyball, I got more of the plyometric training, and then soccer, I've got the cardiovascular training. Basketball's a little bit of everything, but there's also the agility piece to it. And then track and field was just like kind of the speed thing. Like all of those made me a better athlete at everything I did because I did them all. And also, being in a single sport in track and field, where it was kind of you against you, and some of the pushes. That challenge was very different than being in a team full of let's say soccer. So I don't even know how many there are on there, like 16 girls, and then a basketball team's usually about 12. So learning to handle different personalities on different teams, and the different types of pushing you have to do, and even the experience of being under different coaches and seeing different coaching styles, and being able to understand myself a little bit better. Okay, well, I work really well under that coach because of XYZ, but this coach, I really don't like how they do that. So it helped me understand what I needed more to be a better athlete.
That's really good. I had Aaron Volpatti, who played for the Canucks, on the podcast a while ago, and he talked about his son, who's 8 now, and just wants to play hockey, and he's like encouraging him to play other sports, like pick up baseball. He's like, I played tons of sports growing up, because you're right. Like we're hitting 17, 18-year-old athletes that have been playing sport for 15 years, like 14 years already. And no wonder they're having burnout and injuries, and how hard that is on your body. Sport it's so progressive that, I mean, it's that's the way it's going to go. But yeah, I think that's some great feedback there on just having that balance and diversification in sport.
And diversification in training and too, like it's the training that you do in baseball and like even the running component versus being on skates, like it's still going to make you a better athlete. So I think all the greats tell you that too. If you look at, the Wayne Gretzky's and the Kobe Bryant's, like they'll tell you that you gotta play everything, and then you just gotta fine tune that one that you're really trying to excel in.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like it's really to go from an amateur or a high school level to actually a professional level. It's really your mind, like the mindset, the mental game. I mean, I picked up golf later in life, so I turned down other sports kind of as well. I wanted to be an athlete for a long time, not just like a 4-5 year hockey career. But even though I picked up golf when I was, I think, 14 or 15, I'd already been competing since I was like 5. So I already had the mindset, right? Even though I wasn't playing that sport. So the skills, you think of where your skill comes from high school level to a pro level. I mean, you're learning so much skill after that anyway. It's truly the mindset that goes on.
It continues to go for your whole life. I mean,
yes.
I picked up golf at 31, still not very good at it, but like our coach suggested to do it in the summer and the off season when I can't practice my piloting skills because, for instance, putting is like, it's very mental. It's very understanding, reading the ground that's in front of you and to be able to anticipate how to play into it. So that it was good brain training. Again, it's a completely different thing and you don't think that they're related, but in terms of like what you're actually training your brain to do, it correlates. And that's the same for a lot of things.
Brain training. I like that.
Brain training. Yeah.
Okay, Alysia, the hardest question now of the entire podcast. Are you ready for it?
Yeah, hit me.
Is McDavid going to lead the Oilers to a cup finally?
He is. Like is just destiny. So the thing about this year, and I'll wrap it up really quickly, is that the Oilers have a really good chance of getting out of the West here. I think they really do. I don't know. Colorado's coming into their own. I think it might be another Colorado Edmonton Western Conference final, but I think the Oilers have a couple more missing pieces, as long as everyone stays healthy, of course, that can help them get out of the West. The East is so good. They're so dominant. And I'm not even going to deny that the Eastern Conference is way, way better than the West. But my hope is that the East kicks the crap out of each other. So by the time they get to the final, it's just going to be a matter of who's healthier.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
He's so good. He's so good to not have a cup
so
yet.
Good.
It's crazy. All right. Well, Alysia, it's
crazy.
Been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I'll cut our live off here and we can wrap up, but commend you on all of your accomplishments, what you've done for Sport Canada and up and coming women and just everything you've accomplished so far. I know you haven't even begun to scratch what you want to accomplish, but I commend you on all of it, and I really appreciate you having come on the show today. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks so much for having me.